Welcome back to another episode of OutRageous HR. I'm your host, Catherine Boudreaux, and joining us today is Vickie LeNormand. Today we'll cover where compliance plan execution falls apart.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm Vickie LeNormand, Senior VP of Operations from OutSolve. I've been with OutSolve for over 20 years, and I'm excited to be in the hot seat today to talk about compliance.
Thank you for joining us. So can you kick us off with a real-life example or story of when you had a client who thought they had a really strong HR plan and it kind of fell apart?
Sure. I got one example where the company started off strong. They received a checklist. They put together all the items of what they wanted to review. They educated themselves on those requirements. They went through it, figured out what they had already in compliance, what they needed to follow up with other team members because they weren't sure. And then that's it. It fell off. It's a common trap where it starts off strong and then there's no follow through. So then a year later, they're coming back to it. They're having to re-educate themselves. They're having to reconfirm if those items are in compliance. You might have new stakeholders. You start off strong, but it's hard to follow through.
All right, let's debunk one of the biggest HR compliance myths, and then you can give me the fact. Once the HR compliance plan is created, the hard work is done.
Definitely a myth. The fact is, it's an ongoing process. You need to create the plan, identify who's responsible, follow up, quarterly check-ins, regular check-ins, but you got to keep that momentum going. It's not a one and done exercise. That is, definitely a myth that it's over. I find that a lot of times that my HR contacts are seeing that leadership expects them to be like, oh, you already did that internal audit. We're already done. Why are you still wasting your time with that? But you need to keep that momentum going. You need to do those check-ins so that it can be that ongoing process. Otherwise, next year, you're going to be in the exact same spot.
So speaking of companies not having that follow-through on their compliance, what are some of the main reasons that companies fail in their compliance plans in Q1, Q2?
I would say not having cross-functional buy-in. So they start the plan, they get everybody together in a room or on a call, and we discuss all the compliance requirements. We need to find out who's going to handle what. Some of it might be TA, some might be total rewards, procurement, legal. The problem is, though, when it's not your department, you have to then convince that department and say, this is a requirement, we need to do this, and they should prioritize it, but they have other pressing items that they've got going on. So it's really hard when you don't get that cross-functional buy-in to everybody's on the same page and to follow through to actually get that compliance plan executed throughout the year.
Tell me a little bit about what that execution looks like.
I think it's important that you have clear ownership for each of the individual tasks or requirements. So I see the HR manager as kind of like the project manager to make sure we're getting through all this and we're executing successfully. But you got to be careful. I do want that cross-functional buy-in. I want to make sure everyone's helping. It's a collaborative effort, but there could be too many cooks in the kitchen. If we don't have clear accountability for this specific requirement, somebody else the left hand thinks the right hand's doing it. So I think as far as a recommendation to be practical about this is, you have the one initial meeting, everybody gets together and we put a name to each item to say who is going to be accountable and follow through on that specific task.
So if a company is struggling with managing these requirements, or if they don't have a dedicated team for this in-house, what would you recommend for them?
Well, not to toot our own horn, but if you're not using OutSolve, it's something to consider. This is what we specialize in. We aim to be your partner. It's overwhelming to go through all this. You need somebody who's an expert to know what are the requirements, why do we have to do this, what are the best practices? What are samples or examples of other companies? You need that partner to help you with this. And also sometimes it's nice that when you have a third party on these quarterly check-ins, when you have those other team members who are our stakeholders that are on the calls with you, they need to hear, sometimes they don't listen to HR, they need to hear from another voice on why this is required and what's the easiest way sometimes to get this done, the most efficient way, or what's the low-hanging fruit? What do I need to do first? What do I need to prioritize? So our purpose is to, we want to be that partner. We want to offer compliance as a service to our customers.
So what is an example of a compliance activity that should be documented throughout the year?
Something that I think people forget about is reviewing your company's public-facing website. There's been a lot of times where marketing might need to change things, change the brand, something just gets accidentally removed. So I would say at least once a year at a minimum that the team is reviewing, are our policies still out there, the certain wording that we needed, that were required, the taglines. And sometimes if you may want to at least notify that team, the marketing team or whoever is in charge of the website, that if there is an upgrade coming or something's about to change, please connect with compliance because there are things that cannot be removed. And I find a lot of times that when we do our annual review, we're assuming, oh, we already checked that last year. We're good, right? But it's something that you wouldn't think, but it's something that does change and you don't realize it. And we have to go back and make some updates.
All right, Vickie, we've made it to the rapid fire question round. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. One word that describes most HR teams in Q1.
Stressed.
Number one reason plans fall apart.
Lack of accountability.
What's one thing that OutSolve does that makes compliance easier?
Compliance as a service.
So, Vickie, what is on your HR watch list right now?
Well, I do have some upcoming reminders to call out. First, you need to check your labor law posters. A ton of states have had some updates as of January 1st. California pay data reports are due May 13th. Start gathering and organizing your data for the EEO1s and the VETS 4212 reports that'll happen later this year. Ensure you're still having those voluntary self-ID forms available for veterans and individuals with disability. And make sure your I-9 forms are up to date and signed within 3 days of hire.
If your 2025 HR compliance plan is sitting in a folder with no follow-through, let's change that. OutSolve helps you go beyond the plan to real ongoing execution. From automated alerts to hands-on support, our team helps make compliance consistent and stress-free. Visit outsolve.com to learn more or talk with one of our consultants. Please feel free to continue the conversation in HR Gumbo City, our Slack community built specifically for HR professionals. It's a great place to ask other HR professionals questions or for guidance and advice. HR Gumbo members get exclusive first access to checklists, guides, research reports, and more. Visit outsolve.com/HRG-city to join today. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time.